Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the last panel discussion of the day. Um, my name is Paul Toyne, and for those of you who don't know me, I've most of my career has been in climate change and working for making our built environment more sustainable. Um, and I'm currently the Sustainability Director at Grimshaw Architects. And if you don't know Grimshaw, think Eden Project, redevelopment of London Bridge, many projects are now actually delivering net zero carbon designs and operations, such as the civil engineering building at Cambridge University. And we've set a target of getting to net zero carbon ready designs by 2025. And of course, utilising and implementing the principles of the circular economy is part of an approach to get to that net zero. And actually, I was delighted when I joined Grimshaw to realise that we had a 1970s design, Grimshaw and O'Farrell, Bath, for it was a Herman Miller furniture factory, and it had been designed with the principles of flexibility and adaptive reuse. So fast forward nearly 40 years, and the new owners, which was Bath Spa University, came back to us and said, can we redesign the building? And so we repurposed it. We added another level. We improved the facade a little bit, improved the thermal performance, and now it's really it's a new home again for both those schools. And that's going back to the 70s and implementing and using the ideas of the circular economy. So today we want to explore that, and to do so we've got an expert panel. We've got Sarah Griffiths from One McDonald, Kirsten McCarthy from Aggregates Industries, Peter Kelly from ISG, Kane Greenoff from Morgan and Sindall, and Rafe Bertram from Enfield Council. So before we start, I think it's important just to set the context, because the circular economy is important not just as an approach to help decarbonisation, but actually when we think more broadly about some of the issues that we're facing, issues of resource scarcity, issues of biodiversity loss, pressures from humans on consumption of these construction materials and various other things, that we need to be more efficient and better with the use of what we've already got, maximising its value. So, when we think about it, we all talk about the importance of a good client, an educated client. So I want to start with you, Rafe, if I may. From your perspective, we're talking about Enfield Council and your work maybe at Meridian Water. What have you been doing?
Well, I think what you say is really good, Paul. I think the where we take our cue from is really from the London Plan, and that there's such good stuff in the London Plan about circular economy and embodied carbon. But what we're doing in Enfield, we're taking the LETI targets, the excellent LETI targets for embodied carbon, having them as the planning guidelines, the strategy guidelines for what we're doing on Meridian Water and for the borough as a whole. But then not just thinking about embodied carbon, but using the circular economy to help that embodied carbon reduction happen through things like we have this circular economy construction forum every 2 months. There's one coming up on next Friday, the 23rd of June, which we involve people from all over the borough, from all over London, from contractors, from dismantling contractors, designers, architects, engineers, clients, developers, etc., to try and sort of allow the whole ecosystem, the whole value loop that we have to meet each other, to know each other, to exchange ideas, materials, contact details, etc. So there's a cultural shift that we're doing and helping to make happen, and there's a lot of interest in that and people seeing a lot of benefit from that. We've established something called the excess materials exchange, which is a sort of data bank of reusable materials, and that's becoming more and more gathering more and more interest. But please everybody get involved and help contribute to that. Setting a value retention metric. There aren't circular economy metrics at the moment, but it's developing, and we're working on something called the value retention metric, which says like 100% you're reusing everything, 0% new materials, and you're throwing everything away. So it's quite a simple target there. So that's what we're doing. We're seeing the benefits of that. I think it's really interesting. It's actually a more efficient system rather than making and throwing stuff away, and it's starting to happen on site in Meridian Water, which we're really chuffed about.
Thank you. And forgive me, David Cheshire, I didn't introduce you, so apologies. So I'd like you, I just want to pick up on what Rafe has just said, David. So David's from ACOM. Are you seeing, the kind of approaches that Rafe has just outlined? Are you seeing that more commonly with other clients? And what are your more broader observations about what are the drivers for the circular economy within construction?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I definitely echo Rafe there. I think awareness has definitely gone up hugely in the last couple of years, and I have to say, is driven a lot by GLA policy, and I know that's not across the whole country, but it's certainly helping, I think, to raise awareness and drive a lot of projects to be thinking more about circularity. And of course, there's the net zero carbon and the embodied carbon targets, which are linked, but and related to circularity. So I think that's also driving things. In terms of what we've been doing, working on lots of projects. We work with the GLA, we're working on lots of other projects and driving people to think more about this and driving change. I think that what's been exciting was working with Rafe actually on Meridian Water on one of the projects. And what was interesting about that is that Meridian Water and Rafe set targets in the brief that were related to the circular economy. Things like got to be 40% biogenic materials or reclaimed materials, and that actually drove the whole concept of the design. Because fundamentally, if you've got to reclaim everything, you've got to start designing the building around what materials you can get from elsewhere. And I think what was interesting about that as well is that Rafe said to us was, I don't want to hear you can't achieve these targets, which is kind of what we often do, isn't it? Say, well, we could get that, but that's too difficult. We can't get that one. He said, I want you to design something that meets the targets and then tell me what the implications of that is. So does that mean that we're going to cost more money, or does that mean we're going to have to change our procurement approach or whatever it is? And that's what we did. And I think it came up with a really interesting answer. So yeah, I think things are starting to change.
So that client leadership and the brief is absolutely key to it. But given the challenge and the urgency of the issue, and I want to bring Sarah in, if I may, from McDonald. Are we moving fast enough on this critical issue? Who is actually doing it well aside from Rafe and Enfield Council, and what can we learn?
In terms of adoption being fast enough, I think we are at that tipping point now with circular economy where we're going from theory to practice, and we're starting to see sort of measurables on projects, which is really exciting. So for us, every time we take on a new brief, we're finding that there's more awareness, there's more best practice ideas out there from all disciplines that are coming to the table, which is fantastic. In terms of who's doing well and what are the benefits, leading on from Rafe, I think it really is the public sector for us that we're seeing are leading the way in terms of organisational policy development, setting targets and specifications to stimulate the supply chain. And I think the public sector are really well positioned to reap the benefits of circularity because they are a multi-asset owner, so they can repurpose items within their own portfolio. They are owners of retained assets as well. So obviously they build, own, and then occupy their assets, which sometimes that isn't the case with the commercial sector. And there's also the opportunity for them to benefit from DFMA and platform approaches where we're looking at sort of the benefits of standardization across whole schools or hospital portfolios, for example. So when you think about improved asset management or refurbishment and retrofitting, which are all circular economy principles, these are all opportunities for the public sector to benefit from. And of course, they're all important for cost saving as well. So for me, that's sort of our key client leading the way at the moment is the public sector, not just boroughs like Rafe, but the whole public sector in general.
And just thinking again from a design and engineering perspective, I just want to quickly go back to David. Is there anything else you would add and what you're seeing in terms of adoption being fast enough and who's doing it well?
I think, yeah, I think it is. I think it's too slow for the climate crisis. Definitely. I think the problem is always that if you look at something like energy and carbon, it's taken in operation stages. It's taken us a long time to get to the point we are now to maturity. And I think it's we're trying to push it through much faster this time because of the urgency. But I think it is difficult, and I think there are still a lot of people who are doing the same thing and hoping for a different result. So I think and I think there's a push and pull issue as well. I think that actually we need more designers. I think a little frustrated that they can't get more from the supply chain, and I think the supply chain's not equally. The supply chain isn't seeing the demand to provide different things yet. The reclaimed materials and all these other sort of remanufactured materials and biogenic resources and things, and getting those to scale. So I think I'm hoping that we're at a sort of, as Sarah said, a tipping point where actually we can see that going over and push and everything sort of driving each other and moving much more quickly.
So, if I can, Kirsten, can I bring you in here because David was mentioning about supply chain issues, and be really interesting from your perspective in aggregates industries, big business. How what are you doing? How does the circular economy now feature as your? Is it a business model what's going on?
Yeah, so it absolutely is. It's a core part of our sustainability strategy, but also a part of our business model. We last year alone recycled and reclaimed 1.4 million tonnes of material. So we are supplying products that are using alternative raw materials, alternative to traditional aggregates that we are sourcing that are being reused. The most popular of that is replaned asphalt planings. So we're actually planing the road and reusing that in the asphalt, which is working really, really well. The challenge we have is actually the demand, but also I think the understanding between the links between circular economy and carbon, because it's not always necessarily a reduction in carbon if you are transporting recycled aggregates from a location for demolition which is further afield. So it's not always a win-win. And as a supplier and a manufacturer of products, we are balancing all of that. So what we are doing across the UK is creating super hubs for recycling, where we are looking to bring in this the in particular construction demolition waste, which we now call construction demolition material, because we're looking to upcycle it by processing. During that processing, we're doing multiple trials to actually measure what the carbon impact is of that basement aggregates. It's not to say we're doing it necessarily for carbon, because of all the other benefits that we get from using the circular economy. But I think the marketplace and our customers, clients, and designers need to understand that it doesn't always necessarily meet both criteria, and you can actually have conflicting targets. So we're trying to provide all that information, knowledge through our products, but also through working with customers to educate the workplace in that sense, the marketplace as well.
So, in a sense, you're looking at the whole life carbon equation, but also factoring other issues such as quality, cost, and various
Yes.
other parameters.
Oh,
And
yeah, absolutely. So we have to obtain the material. So we are looking for supply. So what we're trying to do is maximize our supply, but then we are processing that, and that the processing to upscale the products isn't simple. There is investment involved in that. So we are doing that at the moment. We are doing the trials to understand the quality, to ensure that the product at the outset and the output of this circular product is suitable and as of high quality as our other products. And we believe it is, and we've proven it. But if we're looking to scale it up and push it through, we need more and more evidence to support that.
so, going back to the earlier comments about pull and push, are you seeing the demand for your reused or recycled materials? And if so, who are you seeing it from?
Yeah, not a huge demand. We are seeing some companies are asking for the use of recycled material, but I think it's definitely a push, not a pull. Again, this is about our customers understanding all broader principles of sustainability. Our customers are still asking for low carbon products. That's the primary and only focus from a customer perspective at the moment. So we are working to try and deliver obviously low carbon products, but also circularity products. So it is very much a push at the moment.
Okay, well, let's bring in, I guess, they're part of your client or customer community. Let's bring in the contractors here. And we've got two. We've got Peter from ISG and Kane from Morgan Sindall. So maybe just going to you first, Kane. What are these options are available? Are you aware of the stuff that's going on with aggregates industries and probably others like Marshalls and whoever? What's actually available for you now, and how are you sending out those clear demand signals, if indeed you're sending those signals out and you want, these types of products?
Yeah, in terms of recycled aggregate, it's probably one of the anomalies within the supply chain. It's probably one of the few products that if you use recycled content, the embodied carbon is higher than using virgin material. So it's like Kirsty mentioned, it contradicts what we're trying to achieve. I think the clients need to be clear. We are looking at around building Morgan Sindall's embodied carbon library. I spoke to hundreds of manufacturers to find out their embodied carbon, and I've spoke to hundreds of manufacturers about circularity. It is a bit of an odd one. Aggregate is, like to recycle aggregate is higher in carbon generally compared to virgin one material. So it kind of defeats the objective if you're trying to achieve low carbon targets. But in terms of circularity, it ticks all the boxes. I suppose what we need is probably more direction from clients, in terms of what they're after, because some of the targets that they're picking, they're picking from a sheet, a piece of paper without doing carbon calculations, and we're really trying hard to hit them targets. Obviously, it won't help if we use recycled aggregate when the embodied carbon can be so many tonnes higher than we'll be using virgin one. I think it just needs the whole industry understanding, how circularity links into the decarbonisation within construction, as well as obviously the things that people are asking. It just needs to be much clearer.
But in your conversations with your suppliers, and let's move away from aggregates because there's thousands of other building products out there. What kind of responses are you getting? Are they surprised that you're asking these questions, and have they got a mature response in terms of understanding the science and those principles?
Yeah, I've been looking at this. I've been looking at embodied carbon for the last 3 years, and when I first started to ask our supply chain, it was relatively new. Now, obviously, when I speak to them, they're actually moving on with understanding obviously what's in terms of circular economy, circular practices. And what tends to happen though, if we're looking at circular economy, not carbon, is you're getting a lot of manufacturers who are making claims cradle to grave or cradle to cradle products, and saying that it can be recycled and they can take it back. But the people at the other end of the spectrum, the demolition strip out companies, and even in some cases contractors, don't understand what opportunities exist. To me, in terms of circularity with the rest of the industry, for it to work, it needs more transparency. So we know where products are starting off with, a bit like, I forgot what they call it now, where you actually get a material passport. So at the end of the job, when you come to demolish that building, you look at the material passport and it tells you exactly what options you have available with recycling that material. It's too far, there's the manufacturers doing one thing, and the demolition contractors not really aware of what's really available at the other end. I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. It just needs more transparency. What I have found about carbon, though, reusing products does, in general, provide much greater savings. Aggregate just happens to be one of the
sure. Okay. Well, let's move on a bit and get maybe a slightly different perspective, or maybe there's commonality here. And that's with you, Peter. With from your perspective and the type of work ISG does, what are you observing? What are the pull and push features around the circular economies as a method?
Thanks, Paul. I have a little bit of sympathy with the clients and designers, if I'm honest, because they're often trying to design for almost the future, where you could be having a scheme that may not come to site till 12, 18 months' time. So it's difficult for them to know what materials are going to be available to design into their scheme. So I think the driver there is around getting a proper marketplace going within the construction industry for material reuse. We have managed it where we've been given a very green light from the client, in particular the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, which you'd obviously expect to be very sustainable in their approach to their new offices in Cambridge, where we introduced LED lights from a Cate fit out in central London, 350, were carefully removed, sent back to the original manufacturer, specials lighting design, tested, and the original warranty honoured and installed. Circular steel, reused steel on for the PV canopy, raised access floor retained and reused, reception desk removed from the copyright building in London, modified and reinstalled. So there are options out there. I'm not saying you don't have to do a little bit of work for them, but I'd certainly say there's no harm in calling manufacturers when you've got a product and asking if they're willing to look at it, because Specials certainly hadn't done anything like this before, but we're happy to have a conversation. They knew exactly where those lights were, and they were happy to take them back and have a look at them. So I think there are opportunities out there. Unfortunately, you do have to do a little bit of work for them. It will improve once we can work together and collaborate to get a much better materials marketplace going.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very key, isn't it, to have the secondaries materials market that actually has to be cost competitive. And within that, it needs to provide certain levels of data and information for the buyer to be confident about the provenance, the quality, etc. And I'm just wondering, because I just chaired a session on decarbonising steel, and we were talking about materials passports and some of the great work I've seen done by Cares, where you're looking at rebar steel, and you've got the product information, and it's all there. What's maybe Sarah, you can just come in a bit here. Is there a digital transformation required, or is it happening in the materials sector? And maybe Kirsten as well, you might want to comment on that. And if not, why not? Because isn't that going to be key as an important ingredient into the secondary materials market in terms of what the buyer's looking for?
Yes, absolutely. We are seeing clients request material passports on projects. I think the problem we have as an industry at the moment is we need a standardization for that. We need to move forward with sort of a commonality because we're all doing different things. We sit on the UKGBC Circular Economy Forum. There's lots of ideas in this space. Forms architects in particular are doing some fantastic work. Obviously, we've got Buildings as Material Banks project as well. But yes, we absolutely need that digital information. I think, as Kane said earlier, about the construction product, so that we can track and trace materials and facilitate reuse going forward. We need that sort of, think of it as a virtual, shopping experience as you would source other materials. We need to know what's available. So yeah, absolutely, this space needs
Maybe Kirsten, from you, when you're talking about the circular economy being part of your business model, and you're now providing, recycled and reused materials. Do you provide a digital passport? Is it an EPD? Is it more than that? What evidence do you need to provide to your customers?
So currently we're not providing that, but it's certainly something that we are, as part of this, our supply and processing and delivery of our materials, we're certainly seeing an increase in inquiries for it. We do supply EPDs, but not currently for our recycled materials, but that's something that we are seeing a demand for. So we are looking to progress imminently to provide that to the marketplace. What we do instead is we have a very sophisticated carbon reporting tool that we developed that actually measures the carbon emitted on a site-by-site basis. So it tells you what fuel we're using at the plant, so that will include the processing and all of the fuel and emissions that are associated with that, and then the transportation. So we can provide carbon data it is accredited, but it's not an EPD. But we provide it on a very detailed and very turnaround basis.
Okay, so Rafe, coming back to the client, and you're sending out these demand signals, and on your project up in North London in Enfield, what's how does this little section here in the conversation we're having around material supplies and what the contractors seeing, how are you viewing it from your world? Did you implement any of these ideas and thoughts to trial and to help, or what was the situation?
Well, I think they're all really good ideas, and I think but I think the way that what we've been trying to do is to really focus on um, the information of these materials, and to try and get all the materials into a marketplace. And to get it into a marketplace, they have to be seen. They have to be seen by others. And in a way, I always like this sort of the metaphor that if you're an architect or an engineer designing, let's say, a wall out of blockwork, you never say, "Oh, but I'm specifying blockwork, but is that blockwork made yet? Where is it? Which country is it in?" You just don't think of those things. You just assume, because there's some product guidance, that blockwork would be delivered on site at that time, no questions asked, no problem. But it's because people have that trust, because there is an amount of blocks out there to use, and there is a steady supply of them. So that getting, what we've been really encouraging everybody to, is to get involved with the excess materials exchange, and to start posting and sharing the materials that are available to be bought, given away, collected, or whatever the situation is between the donor and the recipient, but to get it out there so that designers, designers and engineers and architects have the confidence that there's so much out there, that there will be a value to it, that there's a certainty to it, which then gives the value and certainty to the dismantling contractors to be able to sort of say, no, I'm gonna post these materials, because I'm going to get more value out of them. If there's a market for this particular material, it's going to sell for more. So it's
Yeah.
engaging with the market, it's engaging with economics, and it's getting the information out there.
So that sounds all really, easy to do, but the reality is, you need to store these materials. We need to have,
Well,
I remember when I was a contractor, we had consolidation centres, and we were really smart around where we stored, and so we could have just-in-time deliveries, etc. What I mean, let me just ask David, come to you if I may. What are you seeing across the UK around an uptake of maybe high tech entrepreneurs creating sort of like an eBay for material exchanges? How are these materials being stored? Is that happening? How would people in the audience who by the way need to ask me some questions in the chat? So please get your questions in the chat so that I can ask them. But David, what's going on?
Yeah, I think the vision is that we wouldn't be storing stuff because it would be in our buildings, and there'll be so much. If everyone did this, it would work much better. And it's only because there's very little of it going on at the moment that what we're seeing at the moment is mainly large developers and contractors saying, well, I've got a site over there that I'm currently working on that we're taking some stuff down, and there's some steel there that we could reclaim for one of the other buildings on our portfolio. So that's starting to happen. And I think the other thing we need is brokers. So that's what I call them anyway. But people like RMF, who do the remanufactured floor tiles as part of their business model, taking for free. They take away old raised access flooring tiles, remanufacture them, and then they sell them back into the market. And that has been so successful now that actually the thing I should have guessed would happen, but I didn't, was that the price for them has gone from being cheaper than new ones to actually being more expensive because the demand is so high. So you could see that if there were more manufacturers taking on that idea of let's have a parallel work stream which is actually remanufacturing products like the lighting that was mentioned earlier and things like that, then I think that's a much better way of it happening, because they've already got storage facilities that would just be part of their manufacturing process. They put the warranties in place and all that sort of stuff. I think if we're reliant on big chunks of land where people are doing sort of salvage yard type systems, that isn't, I don't think that's going to work, because the value of land is too high in cities to be putting loads of it aside for storage.
No, unless maybe you're the council and you've got those facilities. But before we ask that question to Ray, I just want to touch on the issue around one principle of the circular economy is around services, and that's really what you were describing, David. So the customer gets that service, so the delivery of the new floor tiles, or they may have been repurposed and containing non-virgin materials, but there's a take-back scheme, yeah, and we've seen take-back schemes before in the construction industry. But that service part, where could we envisage a time where the materials retain ownership by the manufacturing company,
pay-per-use sort of model? Yeah.
Is there anything going on being explored in terms of different business models? And that's a question for all panelists to explore. Or is it simply too difficult?
No, definitely is. I mean, there's a lot going in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and they're using. There's the whole pay-per-use lighting model. There's the Mitsubishi have their own M-use model for pay-per-use for lifts, which I think is a really interesting idea, because I think if you're remanufacturing lifts, you've got an operational contract with them anyway, maintenance contract with the lift operators, so with the lift providers, so that could work quite well. But yes, there's a few things. Sorry, I'll let others speak.
Who wants to come in on that as services? You'll have to say that again, Sarah. Sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry, Paul. I'm just saying we're seeing it more in the fit-out space, which I think is what David was alluding to with lighting as a service, for example, electrical items, carpets, things like that. But I think that's definitely interesting concept within the circular economy, products as a service, because it puts the onus back on the manufacturer to take those products back, but also to innovate in that space as well. So whether that's refurbishment or whether that's continually upgrading energy efficiency, for example, that's some of the areas that we're currently seeing.
That's a good point, and just bringing in the high carbon content actually found in some of the products used in MEP services, and why it's high carbon content is because it's constantly being reused. It has to be stripped out and upgraded. And I'd have thought that might be another particular area where these principles of the circular economy could come in. The other question that I had is one that, again, going back to the principles of the circular economy, it's really about maintaining and maximizing the highest value of that material and keeping it in productivity. Now, and I know from the work that I've done in the construction sector that quite often we probably don't want to maximize that value because that's too difficult or there's too many different processes involved. But what we do is we still reuse it, but we may reuse it at its lowest value, so it's not wasted. Is there, are there examples that you can think of where it's the opposite, where we are, the whole construction supply chain is attempting to maximise the value, or maybe you disagree with what I've just said? Kane, you've been speaking to a number of people.
There is some examples. There is some examples. There's not a lot of examples. So reuse as a material for what it's originally intended. I mean, a good example is pallets, Euro pallets. Charlie Law from Pallet Loop is obviously pushing for more reusable pallets rather than being incinerated or going to be chipped for animal bedding. But the steel industry, we've got two companies now who they're not manufacturers, and they will take existing steel from existing buildings, regrade them, test them, and sell them back to the market as steel. So it doesn't get changed.
Right.
It just becomes
Yeah.
back as steel.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, I haven't received any questions from any of you out there in the audience. Now, I'm just suspecting that the expert panel we've got have just been so comprehensive in their answers that you don't have any. But
There
the
is
sad
one there,
news is
Paul.
we've run out. Well, I can't. Maybe I'm in the way. But we okay. I'm not going to ask that question. That sounds really bad of me because we're going to run out of time. Instead, I want to thank the audience. I want to thank the panelists. But I'm going to allow the panelists to say the one thing that they want to see happen to accelerate the circularity principles within construction to help decarbonisation. Very quickly, Rafe first. One thing.
Okay. One thing, measure everything, add it to a digital market, do 3 best practice things and 3 innovation things. That's
Perfect.
more than one,
David.
but thank you.
David.
Yeah, I think I keep saying to people, I think test out products and techniques offline from live projects. I think there's not time on a project to do it, so you have to investigate these things and look at partnerships and things offline.
Peter.
Ask the manufacturers. I asked and I got a positive response.
Okay,
so I asked the right
good.
questions of the right people.
Perfect. We're now going to ask a manufacturer, Kirsten.
Ask the customers. No, in all seriousness, ask. It's all about collaboration. So we will manufacture products to meet the needs of our customers and the broader economy. So we need to work together, work better in collaboration with architects, designers, customers, all of that.
Okay, Kane, very briefly.
Yeah, just reuse what is reusable and recycle what's recyclable. Don't try and send it to other, landfill or waste to energy. Try and keep things in use as much as possible.
Very, very sound words of wisdom. And then Sarah to conclude.
I would like to see innovation from all design disciplines, so not just architectural-led schemes, but I want to see what MEP can bring, structures can bring, civils can bring, landscape can bring, and yeah, everyone bringing their innovations.
Really fantastic, a really truly collaborative effort. And that actually is a nice way to end today because you've all been fabulous panelists. You provided real expert and insightful comments. So I'm really grateful to you. You've been a delight to chair. And I would also like to thank the audience and apologise to Michael. But maybe if you get in touch with Rafe, Michael, the question you ask is very much specific to Rafe, and I'm sure Rafe will be delighted to answer. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to close because it's over to the chair for the whole day to conclude with some closing remarks. But thank you all very much, and I'm hoping that those in the audience are going to give you a virtual round of applause. So thank you to the panelists.